Learn ought to in everyday English. Learn how to use it in everyday life. Ought to equals should or advisable. Used for duty, advice, moral obligation, probability, or expectation. POV point of view, duty, we ought to pay our taxes on time. Advice, suggestion, you ought to drink more water. Moral obligation, we ought to respect our elders. Expectation, this medicine ought to make you feel better. Rule, subject plus ought to plus verb first form. We ought to help the poor. She ought to study harder. Positive statement, you ought to eat more vegetables. He ought to be more careful. Negative form, rule. Subject plus ought not to plus verb first form. Example, you ought not to waste time. They ought not to be rude. Questions rule. Ought plus subject plus to plus verb first form. Example, ought we to help them? Ought she to join the club? Everyday use POV advice. You ought to see a doctor. Moral duty. We ought to protect nature. Probability, rare use case. She ought to be here by now. Quick practice. Fill in the blanks. You know, respect your teachers. We vows ow not to waste water. They ows ow help poor. We ow protect the environment. The train will reach the station soon. Recall probability. Conclusion, use ought to for advice, duty, moral obligation.